They came in white ships shaped like teeth, and they said the word protection the way a butcher says fresh. There had been 6 years of warning, more or less, depending on what you counted as warning. 6 years since the first signal had come through the deep space arrays at Goldstone and Effelsberg, and Arecibo's replacement, in 3 different bandwidths simultaneously, carrying a greeting written by something that had clearly read a great many of humanity's own broadcasts, and had concluded, on the basis of its reading, that humanity was a credulous and friendly species who would respond well to a soft voice and a long compliment. The greeting had been very long and very complimentary. It had taken 9 hours to play in full. The species sending it had called themselves in their own language, a word that translated, depending on which linguist you asked, as either the compact of the cold hunt or, more euphemistically, the family of the patient spear. In English language press they had been the Fenris Compact from the first week, because somebody in Reykjavik had filed the story before somebody in Washington had filed the story, and the Reykjavik name had stuck. Humanity had responded the way humanity responds to most things, badly at first, and then, after a while, with growing competence and quiet preparation. The first 2 years had been embarrassing, heads of state on stages, choirs of children singing, a great deal of weeping about how we were not alone. The next 4 years had been quieter. Less choir, more procurement. Fewer speeches, more shipyards. The choir had been for the cameras and the shipyards had been for the wolves, and humanity had been counting, very quietly on its fingers behind its back, the whole time. Rotha Eriksdottir watched the broadcast on a cracked tablet in a Reykjavik kitchen that smelled of cardamom and old coffee. Her grandmother had the volume up too loud the way old people did, and the alien voice came through the small speaker with a wet sibilance, the consonants softening at the edges, as though the throat producing them was not quite shaped for human language, and had decided that was humanity's problem. "People of Earth," the voice said, and Rotha's grandmother snorted into her cup. "People," the old woman muttered, as if the word means anything when they say it. The alien on the screen was beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful. Tall, narrow, draped in silver-gray fabric that moved with a liquid suggestion of muscle beneath. Its eyes were yellow and set forward like a hunting animal's, and when it spoke its lower jaw articulated in 2 places, the way a snake unhinges to swallow something larger than its head. The translator software at the bottom of the screen tried to keep up, and failed in interesting ways. Formally extend the protection of the Fenris Compact to the inhabited world designated Sol 3, in recognition of your developmental status, and the predatory interest shown by several unaffiliated species in your system. The compact offers a treaty of guardianship. Tribute will be modest, compliance will be rewarded, resistance will be unfortunate. The alien smiled, or what its mouth did was probably meant to be a smile. It had learned about human teeth and had grown its own to match, and the effect was that of a stranger wearing a borrowed face badly. "You have 1 Earth week to accept our terms." The broadcast cut to static. The static cut to a UN press feed. The press feed cut to a panel of pale men in dark suits saying the words "measured response" and "prudent engagement" and "assess our options." And Rotha's grandmother turned off the tablet and set it face down on the wooden table the way you might set down a dead bird. "Amma," Rotha said. "Drink your coffee, child." "Amma, I have to go to base." "I know you do. Drink your coffee first." The old woman stood, slow and stiff, and crossed to the chest by the window. It was the chest that had crossed the Atlantic with her mother, and her mother's mother before that, and Rotha had been told as a child that there were trolls living inside it who would bite her fingers if she opened it without permission. She watched now as her grandmother lifted the lid and took out the cloak. It was the color of old blood. The wool was rough and dense and oiled against weather, and the hood was deep enough to throw the wearer's face into shadow even in full daylight. Her grandmother had been weaving it for 2 years, on and off in the evenings by lamplight when she thought Rotha was not watching. Rotha had been watching. You did not grow up with that woman and fail to watch. It is not finished, her grandmother said, but it is enough. Amma, I can't take that on deployment. It's not regulation. It is wool and it is warm and it is what I have to give you. Put it on. Rotha put it on. The weight of it surprised her, settled across her shoulders like a hand. There was something woven into the lining she could feel through her shirt, a fine wire mesh, almost weightless, the sort of thing you would not notice unless you were looking for it. Amma, what is in this? A little of everything. A little of your grandfather's old work. A little of what your mother sent home from the Mars survey before she died. A little of what I learned from the women in my line who learned from theirs. They have very good eyes, these new neighbors of ours. I thought it would be polite to make it harder for them to see you. Rotha stared at her. Stealth weave, her grandmother said matter-of-factly. Thermal damping, some radar nonsense I do not understand the mathematics of. Your cousin Bjarni helped. You will thank him when you see him. You have been making me a tactical garment. I have been making you a cloak. That it is also tactical is because I am not stupid and neither were you, the last time I checked. Her grandmother smoothed the shoulders of the wool with both hands, the way a mother adjusts a child's collar on the first day of school. Listen to me, Rotha. They will offer you a road that is wide and smooth, and you will see the bones along the edges of it, and you will be told the bones are unrelated to the road. Do not believe them. Stay on the small paths. Trust your own legs. And when the thing in the bed is wearing your friend's face, do not pretend that you do not notice. Amma, I have lived a long time, child. I have buried a husband and a daughter and most of my friends. I have very little left to be afraid of, but I am afraid of these ones. Not because they are strong, because they are hungry and they think we cannot tell. She kissed Rotha once on the forehead, hard, and pushed her toward the door. Go, be careful, come back. Rotha went. The base at Keflavik had been a NATO airfield for most of a century, and a deep-water staging post for the Joint Earth Defense Initiative for the last 6 years. Since first contact, since the human species had quietly understood that it was not alone, and had quietly decided that the appropriate response to this information was not awe but procurement. She drove through 3 gates and showed her face to 4 scanners, and the cloak rode on her arm like a folded animal. The guard at the inner checkpoint, a kid named Thorther from Akureyri, whom she had once watched throw up behind a hangar after his first 0G sim, lifted an eyebrow at the wool. Going to a wedding, Captain. Going to a war, Thorther. Want a coat? No, ma'am. Smart boy. Inside the briefing bunker, the air smelled of recycled atmosphere and bad coffee, and the particular dry electricity of people who had not slept in 2 days pretending they had slept in 2 days. Colonel Magnusdottir was at the front of the room in front of a wall screen, and on the screen was a star map with a great many small red icons on one side of it, and a great many small blue icons on the other side. And a thin black line down the middle that Rotha understood to mean here is where the predator stops and here is where the prey begins, and the line was not where she had last seen it. They've moved the picket inward, the colonel said without preamble. 6 hours ago, their forward elements are now inside our orbital exclusion zone. They are saying nothing about it. They are doing it anyway. This is what they do. They put a foot on the table and they wait to see if you complain. If you complain, they say they were stretching. If you do not complain, the foot stays. A murmur went around the room. You all know the plan, the colonel said. We have been working on the plan since the first transmission 6 years ago. The plan has a name. I am not going to say the name out loud in this room because we are being listened to by at least 3 things I trust and at least 1 I do not. You know which one. The plan begins tonight. She turned and looked directly at Rotha. Captain Eiríksdóttir. You are the courier. Ma'am. You will fly the Litlastulka out to the listening post at L4. You will hand-deliver the package to the woman who is waiting there. She will know what to do with it. You will not transmit. You will not be seen. You will not be clever. You will be small and you will be quiet and you will get there. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. There will be wolves on the road, Captain, several of them. They will try very hard to look like other things. Do not be fooled. No, ma'am. Some context that you will not find in the briefing pack, because the briefing pack is paranoid and assumes its own readers cannot be trusted. We have been moving pieces into position for 6 years, Captain. Quietly. The plan has many parts and you are one part and you do not need to know the other parts and you will not be told them. What you do need to know is that your part is not the most important part. It is not the least important part either. It is the part that, if it fails, makes the other parts much harder, and if it succeeds, makes the other parts much easier. That is all I can tell you. That is, in fact, more than I am supposed to tell you. I am telling you anyway, because the woman waiting for you at L4 is your mother's friend, and because your grandmother called me an hour ago, and because if anything happens to you on this run, I would prefer that you understood before it happened, that what you were doing mattered. People do better in tight places when they know the thing they are doing matters. That is my experience. Yes, ma'am. Your grandmother sends her regards, by the way. Radha blinked. She called the base an hour ago. She wanted me to tell you that she expects you back for Thorliksmessa, and that if you are late she will be very disappointed and you will eat skate without butter for the rest of your natural life. Tell her I'll be on time, ma'am. Tell her yourself, Captain. That is the entire point of the exercise. The Litlastulka was a courier hull the length of a city bus and the width of a small van, painted matte black, with no markings and no transponder and an engine signature engineered to look, to a casual scan, like a piece of old commercial debris drifting on a slow Hohmann arc out of the inner system. She had flown her twice before, once on a training run. Once on a real one, 2 years back, when the package had been a hard drive, and the destination had been a frigate in low lunar orbit, and nothing had gone wrong. This time the package was a small ceramic cylinder the size of a thermos, sealed, dense, cold to the touch through her glove. The technician who handed it to her was a thin woman with very tired eyes, who did not say what was in it. Don't drop it, Captain. Why, what does it do if I drop it? Don't drop it, Captain. Radha stowed the cylinder in the courier compartment behind her flight seat, strapped it down with 4 redundant tethers, and pulled the red cloak over her flight suit. The wool fit beneath the harness without bunching. Her grandmother had measured well. She lifted off at 02, 14 local on a column of soft chemical thrust, no afterburn, no signature flare, and was clear of atmosphere in 9 minutes. The earth fell away below her, blue and white and absurdly precious, and she did not look at it for long because if she looked at it for long she would think about her grandmother in the kitchen with the cardamom and the old coffee and the chest by the window, and she could not afford to think about her grandmother right now. The dark closed in. The first thing the Fenris Compact had done, after announcing themselves, was build a road. They had not called it a road. They had called it a corridor of free transit, established by compact survey vessels for the convenience of all signatories present and future, and they had marked it with bright green beacons every 100,000 kilometers from the edge of Earth's exclusion zone out to the heliopause. The road ran through the cleanest, safest, least obstructed lanes of cislunar space. To use the road was to broadcast your transponder and to declare your destination and to submit in advance to inspection. Radha was not going to use the road. She turned the Litlastulka 20 degrees off the green-lit lane and dropped her into the debris field instead. The debris field had a name in the official charts and another name in the Navy and a third name among the people who actually flew through it. The official name was the Cislunar Hazard Zone. The Navy name was the Boneyard. The crews called it Othen's Garden, because everything in it had been broken by something larger than itself and left to drift, and the only thing that grew there was patience. It was the wreckage of 70 years of human spaceflight, spent boosters, dead satellites, the shattered halves of a Chinese station that had come apart in 2031 during a docking accident nobody talked about, a Russian probe that had failed to escape Earth orbit in 1971 and had been making a slow, eccentric loop ever since, like an old dog circling a yard it could not quite leave. Bolts, hatches, a frozen glove. The remains of an Indian lander that had missed the moon by 400 kilometers in 2024 and was now, technically, in solar orbit, although the orbit was so close to Earth's that the distinction was academic. The Fenris ships did not fly through it. Their sensors were extraordinary at long range and useless at close range. The field's chaos blinded them, and their hulls were thin-skinned and proud and could not take a strike from a frozen bolt at 14 kilometers per second. They flew around it. The road went around it. The corridor of free transit went around it. The Boneyard was, by their reckoning, a place that did not exist. The Litlastulka entered it at minimal thrust, attitude jets only, with her main engines cold and her radar passive and Rotha's hands very light on the stick. The cloak's mesh hummed faintly against her collarbone as the cabin's heat signature dropped to ambient. She breathed shallow. The first hour was the worst. After the first hour, you stopped flinching every time a piece of frozen aluminum tumbled past the viewport. And after the second hour, you started to feel the rhythm of it, the slow waltz of dead things in their long fall. She had been in the field for 4 hours when the proximity alert chimed. Soft single tone, not a collision warning, a presence warning, something with mass and shape and intent sitting in the dark ahead of her, not drifting. She killed all systems except the passive scope and brought the courier to a slow tumble, no thrust, just inertia, drifting, looking like a piece of junk. She put her eye to the optical scope and waited for her pupils to adjust. It was a Fenris cutter, small by their standards, the size of a tugboat. Painted matte to absorb light, with no running lamps, sitting still in the Boneyard at a depth no Fenris vessel was supposed to be capable of reaching, between the carcass of a Soviet booster and the long bone of a discarded solar panel. Waiting. Rotha lay very still in the cradle of the flight seat and watched the cutter watch the dark. They knew. They knew about the road that was not a road. They knew about the Boneyard that was not a boneyard. Someone had told them, or they had figured it out, or they had always known, and the corridor was the lie, and this dark, patient ambush in the place humans thought was theirs was the truth. She thought of her grandmother saying, "You will see the bones along the edges of it, and you will be told the bones are unrelated to the road." She thought very calmly, "All right then." The cutter held its position for 40 minutes. Rotha held hers for 41. She let the Litlastulka tumble past it at a distance of 9 kilometers, close enough to feel the suggestion of a sensor sweep brush across her hull, and find nothing but cold metal and old paint, and the rough oiled wool of a cloak that was, somehow, doing what an old woman in Reykjavik had said it would do. When the cutter was behind her, she did not accelerate. She drifted. She drifted for 2 more hours, and then she drifted for 2 more, and her bladder protested, and her shoulders ached from holding still, and her mouth tasted of metal from chewing the inside of her cheek, and she did not accelerate. You did not run from a wolf. Running was what told the wolf it was a wolf. You walked and you hummed, and you did not look back, and you let the wolf decide on its own whether you were worth the trouble of the chase. She hummed under her breath a tune her grandmother had taught her, an old fishing song from the Westfjords, about a girl who was sent to deliver bread to her grandmother and who met something on the road that was not what it said it was. She hummed it under her breath, just lips and tongue, no sound. She had been clear of the cutter for 6 hours when she found the drone. It was small, smaller than a coffee can, Matt Gray, four-finned, drifting through the boneyard at a velocity slightly higher than the local debris average, which is what made the proximity scope notice it. Rotha killed her drift again and watched it pass at a distance of 2 kilometers and understood, looking at it through the optical scope, that it was not human-made. The lines were wrong. The geometry was wrong. Humans built tools the way humans built houses, with corners that looked like corners and edges that looked like edges. The drone's edges were not edges. They were transitions. They moved from one surface to another the way water moves over a stone. And there were no rivets and there were no seams, and there was nothing that suggested a hand had ever held it. It was a compact recon drone. It was deep inside the boneyard. It was looking for her. She let it pass. It did not see her. The cloak's mesh sang against her collarbones, warm now, working hard, and she lay in the harness and watched the drone tumble past her at 2 kilometers and 40 minutes later watched the next one. And 40 minutes after that the next, and she understood, with the cold, clear understanding of a person who has just learned the size of the thing they are inside, that the compact had seeded the entire field. Hundreds of drones, maybe thousands. The compact had been preparing for this run, or one like it, for years. They had been watching the boneyard from inside the boneyard, with eyes too small to see and too many to count. The whole time humanity had been congratulating itself on having a road the wolves did not know about. The wolves had known. The wolves had been letting humanity feel clever. The wolves had been doing what wolves did, which was sit very still and wait for the deer to step where the deer thought it was safe. Rotha lay in the harness for a long time after the third drone passed and did not let herself shake yet, because the shaking would come later and now was not later. She thought about her grandmother saying they will offer you a road that is wide and smooth, and you will see the bones along the edges of it. She had assumed her grandmother had meant the Green Beacon corridor. She understood now that her grandmother had meant everything. The corridor was a road. The boneyard was a road. There were no roads that were not roads. There were only places where the wolves had built fences and places where the wolves had not bothered. Because at the places where the wolves had not bothered, the wolves had simply seeded the ground with eyes. She thought, all right, then I will be a piece of junk that has eyes of its own. She stayed dark. She drifted. The drones drifted. The boneyard drifted. The dance went on for another 9 hours, and at no point did Rotha put a finger on the stick, and at no point did the cloak stop humming, and at no point did her grandmother's wool stop doing what her grandmother had said it would do. When she finally cleared the field, she did not let herself believe she had cleared the field. She drifted for 3 more hours past the last drone she could see, and then 3 more hours past that, and only then, when the local space was empty of mass on every scope she could safely run, did she let herself accept that she was through. She hummed it the whole way through the boneyard. When she came out the far side, into the clean dark between the Earth-Moon system and the long fall to L4, she let the Litlastulka coast for another hour before she risked even a whisper of thrust. Then she lit the engines very gently and put the courier on her arc to the listening post, and finally allowed herself to breathe out, slow, all the way to the bottom. The cylinder in the compartment behind her had not made a sound the entire time. She did not know what was in it. She was beginning to have ideas. L4 was not on any map that civilians had access to. The Earth-Sun L4 Lagrange point sat 60 degrees ahead of Earth in its orbit, a gravitationally stable pocket where small objects could be parked indefinitely with very little fuel cost. The official position of the Joint Earth Defense Initiative was that L4 contained 1 decommissioned weather satellite and a small amount of dust. The unofficial position was that L4 contained a listening post the size of a small hotel, painted to match the cosmic microwave background, populated by 26 of the most paranoid and competent signals intelligence officers Earth had ever produced, and that everything the Fenris Compact had ever said to anyone on any channel, in any direction for the last 6 years, had been recorded, decrypted, translated, and stored in the Listening Post archives, including the things the Fenris Compact had said to other people about Earth. Radha approached L4 the way she had been taught to approach it, which was by not approaching it. She put the Litla Stulka into a wide elliptical pass that would, if uncorrected, send her 3 million kilometers past the Lagrange point and out into the dark, and she waited for the Listening Post to find her. It found her in 19 minutes, a tight beam laser pulse, no broader than her own pupil, tapping out a recognition code in the soft language of her own grandfather's wartime cipher. She tapped back. The pulse acknowledged. A docking vector arrived on her console in clean white text, and she followed it the rest of the way home. The woman waiting for her at the airlock was small and gray and ferociously calm. Her name was Dr. Sigriður H. Hjaltadottir, and she had been Radha's mother's best friend at university, 40 years ago, and Radha had not seen her since the funeral. The Listening Post smelled, very faintly, of cinnamon and ozone. 26 people worked there. Radha saw in the first corridor 2 of them, a heavyset man with a thick Russian beard hunched over a console with the focused stillness of a chess grandmaster 3 moves from checkmate, and a tiny woman with gray braids and the longest fingers Radha had ever seen, who was knitting, of all things, while 3 different waveforms scrolled on the screens around her. The woman looked up as Radha passed, nodded once, and went back to her knitting and her waveforms without breaking the rhythm of either. "That is Marina," Sigga said, walking. "She has been listening to the Compact's encrypted command channel for 4 years. She knits when she works. She says it is the only way she can keep her hands from trembling. She has reason to tremble. She lost her family on Stalsund Station in 2034, when the Compact's first survey ship swept too close and our orbital mechanics had not yet been corrected for the gravitational shadow of their hull. We told the public it was a meteor. Marina knows what it was. Marina has been knitting ever since." "Sigga. Radha, the cloak is good. Did your Amma make it?" "She did." "I will write her a letter. Give me the cylinder." Radha gave her the cylinder. Sigga took it with both hands, gentle as a midwife, and walked away down a corridor that smelled of solder and tea, and Radha followed because nobody had told her not to. They came into a room full of screens. The screens showed star fields and waveforms and lines of alien script scrolling slowly upward. At the center of the room was a circular console with a slot in the top of it, and Sigga placed the cylinder into the slot and waited until the slot turned green, and then she turned to Radha and said, very mildly, "Would you like to know what you just delivered?" "I would, yes." "It is a key, cryptographic. It pairs with a series of locks we placed inside the Fenris Compact's own communications network 6 years ago, when their first survey ship came through and was, in their estimation, unobserved. They were wrong about being unobserved. They have been wrong about a number of things. We have been listening to them talk to each other for 6 years, Radha. We have learned a great deal." "Like what?" Sigga smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Like the fact that they have done this before. Earth is not the first planet they have offered protection to. There is a list. The list is long. The planets on the list are not on the list anymore because there are no longer planets there to be on lists. They strip, they harvest, they leave. They have done it 41 times that we have confirmed, and probably twice that number we have not. We have names. We have dates. We have recordings of their senior officers laughing about it." She tapped the console. The slot pulsed once. "The key you brought will, in approximately 6 hours, allow us to broadcast everything we have learned on every frequency the compact species can hear. To every client world. To every neighbor species they have bullied or bribed into silence. To the 3 large powers in this arm of the galaxy who do not love the compact but have not, until now, had a reason to move against it. Sigga. It will also at the same time deliver a small surprise to the compact's command and control architecture. They have built their fleet on a shared cognitive lattice. Beautiful piece of engineering. linked minds across the entire chain of command. Very efficient, very fast, very, very difficult to defend if you happen to have spent 6 years quietly inside it taking notes. Rotha stared at her. Ragnarok, she said. That is what the colonel calls it. We call it the chore. We are not poetic people in this room. Siggo. How long has this been planned? Since about 11 minutes after they made first contact, child. We are not stupid. We are a small species and we are a young species, and we have done a great many foolish things in our short history, but we are not stupid. And we noticed immediately that the polite ones with the beautiful ships and the talk of protection had teeth that did not match their faces. So we smiled and we said how interesting, and we asked them many questions, and we put our hands behind our backs while we asked them, and we counted very quietly on our fingers. She drew a long breath. The first thing we noticed was the way they pronounced our species' name. They had 3 different pronunciations, and they used different ones when speaking to different governments. The pronunciation they used in their own private channels, which we were not supposed to be hearing but were, by the 2nd month, was a 4th one, and it was not flattering. It was the word they used for the small animals that lived in the walls of their ships. The translation that came out of their first transmission, in which they called us friends, was not the word they used for friends in their own internal communications. It was the word they used for the gardener's tools. We noted that. We did not mention it. We pretended we had not noticed. We are very good at pretending we have not noticed. It is one of the things our species is best at, and it is one of the things their species understood the least about us. They thought our friendliness was sincerity. They did not understand that for us, friendliness is, very often, the thing we put on while we are deciding what to do with you. She tapped the console. The slot pulsed once more. The second thing we noticed was the size of their fleet. They told us in their first official census exchange that the compact maintained a fleet of approximately 400 capital vessels. They were lying. The actual number is closer to 1,100, and the 1,100 are spread across a great deal of space, and many of the 1,100 are old, and many of the old ones have not been refitted in decades because the compact has been spending its budget on harvesting rather than on shipbuilding, because harvested worlds do not, on the whole, shoot back. They have grown soft, child. They have grown soft the way a man grows soft after 20 years of beating people who cannot fight him. They no longer know how to fight someone who can. They do not even know how to imagine such a person. We have been preparing, very carefully, to be that person. She turned the console off. The screens darkened. And now we are done counting. Stay the night, Rotha. There is a bunk. There is real food. In the morning you will fly home. I will give you a letter for your Amma. We will not see each other again for some time, I think, because things are about to become loud. Rotha nodded. She did not trust her voice. She slept badly. She dreamed of the cutter in the boneyard, sitting still in the dark, waiting. And in the dream the cutter had her grandmother's face on it, except the eyes were yellow and the mouth was too wide. She woke up at 3 in the morning, station time, and lay in the bunk for a while looking at the low ceiling and listening to the soft pumps of the post's life support. And she thought about the cylinder she had carried out and the cylinder she would carry back, and about the 41 stripped worlds, and about a small alien officer somewhere on a ship she would never see, who was about to be asked, in her own voice, whether she had known. She wondered, in a way she did not want to wonder, whether that officer had a grandmother, whether the grandmother had taught her a song, whether the grandmother, if she had one, had ever sat across from her at a kitchen table and watched her with patient yellow eyes and decided, slowly, that her granddaughter was the thing the family had been counting on. She hoped very faintly that some of them did. She hoped even more faintly that some of them would say no when the question came. She did not have a great deal of hope left after 6 years of preparation and 1 night of flying through a field of seeded eyes, but she had a little, and she spent it on the unknown granddaughter she would never meet. Then she rolled over, and after a while she slept again, and the dreams did not come back. She woke up before the alarm. In the morning, Sigga gave her a letter, a thermos of coffee, and a different cylinder. This one was smaller, this one was warm. What is this one? Insurance, take it home, give it to the colonel, she will know. Sigga. Go, child. The wolves will be moving by now. They will know something is wrong, they will not know what. They will be looking for shapes that are out of place, be a piece of junk again, drift home. She kissed Radha on the forehead, hard, the way her grandmother had. Radha flew. The trip back was longer than the trip out because she had to take the longer arc, the one that swung wide of the boneyard on the inner side rather than the outer, the one that crossed 3 of the compact's beacon lanes at oblique angles, the one that required her to drift dark across 2 of them and run cold across the 3rd with every system she could shut down, and her own breath the loudest sound in the cabin. She crossed the 1st lane at hour 6, nothing. She crossed the 2nd lane at hour 14. Nothing, or nothing she could see. There was a smell in the cabin that she could not place, faint, metallic, the smell of solder cooling, and she sat in the harness with the smell for an hour before she realized it was coming from the cloak. The mesh was working harder than it had on the outbound leg. Something in the compact's sensor net had changed. Something had been turned on that had not been on before. She did not know what. She did not need to know what. She needed only to be drift in silence and the slow tumble of a piece of dead metal in a dead lane, and the cloak helped her be that, and she helped the cloak by not breathing too hard. She crossed the 3rd lane at hour 22, and there was something there. It was not a cutter this time, it was a frigate. A Fenris frigate, long and white and slow, sitting astride the beacon lane with its broadside open to the dark. And as Radha drifted past it at a distance of 400 kilometers, her passive scope caught the frigate's running lamps coming alive one by one, in a slow, deliberate sequence, and she understood with a cold and perfect clarity that the frigate had seen her. Not seen her clearly, not seen her enough to fire, but seen the shape of a shape where a shape should not be, and the running lamps were a question. They were the wolf in the bed asking in its soft and reasonable voice, whose voice is that at the door. Radha did not answer. The frigate held its position, the lamp stayed on. After a minute, a tight beam pulse swept across her hull, very narrow, very precise, looking for a transponder. The cloak's mesh hummed. The Litla Stulka's cold hull gave the pulse back nothing but the spectral signature of old paint and broken metal. The frigate held its position. A second pulse, broader this time, less polite. The cloak hummed harder. Radha could feel the wire in the wool against her collarbones, warming, working. She kept her hands off the stick. She kept her breathing slow. She did not think about the cylinder behind her or her grandmother in the kitchen or the cutter in the boneyard. She thought about the song, the fishing song, the girl on the road. A third pulse, narrower, sharper, focused. The cabin's interior temperature dropped 1 degree, then 2, then 3, as the cloak shunted her own body heat into a wide, thin spread across the hull, mimicking the cold, uneven warmth of a piece of debris that had been baking in the sun on one side and freezing on the other for 40 years. Her breath made clouds in front of her face. The cylinder behind her ticked once again in its small private rhythm. She did not look at the frigate. Looking at the frigate would not help. She looked at the cabin's small icon of a saint that her grandmother had stuck to the dash before takeoff, a paper sticker of Saint Brendan with his small boat, and she breathed through her nose, slow. She hummed it under her breath, just lips and tongue, no sound. The frigate's lamps blinked, in a sequence she did not understand, and then went dark again. The frigate drifted on. Radha did not move for an hour. Then she moved very slowly, and then she moved a little less slowly, and then she was past the beacon lane and into the long fall toward Earth, and only then did she let herself shake. She shook for a long time. The cabin was very small and very quiet, and she shook in the harness like a child who had run too far from home and was only now noticing how far. The cylinder behind her ticked once softly, like a small clock. She did not know whether that was good or bad. She decided not to think about it. She thought, instead, about what she would tell her grandmother. She thought she would tell her about the boneyard and the cutter and the song and the frigate and the lamps. She thought her grandmother would listen, nodding, the way she always listened, and then would put a hand on Rotha's knee and say, in the voice she used when she was not going to argue, "You did well, child, and you will not do it again because we will not need you to." Rotha hoped that was true. She came in over the North Atlantic at a steep angle, hot, fast, no longer hiding, because by the time she crossed Earth's exclusion zone, the hiding was over and the loudness had begun, and there was no point in being a piece of junk anymore when the sky behind her was full of fire. The fire had started 6 hours after Sigga's key had turned in its lock. Rotha watched it on the cabin display as she came in. The Fenris Compact's cognitive lattice, the beautiful linked minds command structure their senior officers had been so proud of, was no longer linked. The lock Sigga's team had placed inside it had unlocked, all at once, and what had come out of those locks was not, as Rotha had assumed, a weapon. It was a question. A very simple question, asked simultaneously of every officer in the fleet, in their own voices, in the voices of their commanders and their subordinates and their old teachers and the lovers they had left behind on whatever world had hatched them. The question was, did you know about the 41? The 41 stripped worlds, the 41 promised protections, the 41 harvests. The Compact had kept the list very quiet, even from itself. Most of its officers had not known. Most of its officers, it turned out, had ideals. Most of its officers, when asked the question by every voice they trusted at once, did not have a good answer. The lattice did not fail because humanity broke it. The lattice failed because the Compact's officers, asked the question, began arguing with each other. Not all of them, but enough. Enough that the orders coming down from command stopped being obeyed cleanly. Enough that the ships in the picket began moving on their own initiatives. Enough that, when the 3 large powers in this arm of the galaxy, the powers who had not loved the Compact but had not, until now, had a reason to move, received the broadcast Sigga's team had been sitting on for 6 years, and saw the recordings of senior officers laughing about the harvests, the Compact's diplomatic position evaporated in the time it took those powers to convene an emergency session and vote. The vote was unanimous. The Compact's protection of Sol 3 was rescinded by the Compact's own peers, on the grounds that no protection had been requested, no treaty had been signed, no jurisdiction had ever existed, and that any further movement by Compact vessels inside the Sol 3 exclusion zone would be considered an act of piracy against a sovereign world and would be answered accordingly. The picket pulled back, not all at once. Some of it tried to fight. The cognitive lattice was not coordinating it anymore, and the parts that tried to fight did not fight well, and the parts that did not try to fight ran, and the parts that ran were chased by the 3 large powers' enforcement vessels, which had been waiting, very politely, just outside Earth's perception, for a reason. Humanity had given them a reason, a complete one, time-stamped, cross-referenced in the Compact's own voices. Rotha came in over Iceland at a steep, hot angle, and the sky above her was empty of teeth-shaped ships for the first time in 6 years. She did not see the picket leave. She heard about it later. At the moment, she saw only the brown and green of her own country beneath her, and the wet gray of the sea, and the small lights of Reykjavik in the early dusk, and she thought with a tired and uncomplicated joy, I am going to be on time for Thorlaksmessa. She landed at Keflavik 2 hours before midnight. The colonel was on the apron to meet her. So was her cousin Bjarni, who had apparently been responsible for the wire in the cloak. So was Thorther from the inner checkpoint, who saluted her badly and grinned at her worse. So, somehow, sitting in a wheelchair that someone had wheeled out onto the cold concrete and parked at a respectful distance from the engines, wrapped in a coat too large for her, was Rotha's grandmother. Rotha came down the ramp slowly. The cloak was still around her shoulders. She had not taken it off. She walked past the colonel, who led her. She walked past Bjarne, who stepped aside. She walked across the apron in her flight boots, and she knelt down on the cold concrete beside the wheelchair, and she put her forehead against her grandmother's hand. "Amma, you are on time." "Yes, Amma." "You will eat skate with butter." "Yes, Amma." "You will tell me everything in the morning." "Yes, Amma." "You will not tell me everything tonight, because I am tired and you are tireder, and the things you have seen will be there in the morning, and so will I." "Yes, Amma." "Good girl." The old woman's hand was very thin under Rotha's forehead. The wool of the cloak smelled of wood smoke and oil, and something Rotha could not name that was the smell of her grandmother's chest, the chest by the window, the chest that had crossed the Atlantic with a woman 3 generations back, and had held, in its time, a great many things made by patient hands against the days nobody believed would come. "Amma," Rotha said against the hand. "They thought we did not know." "I know they did, child." "They thought we were soft." "I know they did." "They offered us protection." "Yes." Rotha lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was not. "Amma, do you know what we did?" The old woman in the wheelchair smiled. Not the way the alien on the broadcast had smiled. The other way. The way you smile when you have outlived something that thought it would outlive you, and you do not need to gloat about it, because the gloating is for amateurs and the smile is for the family. "I know what we did, child." "Tell me anyway." "We counted on our fingers. We counted very quietly. And then, when they came to the door pretending to be our grandmother, we opened the door and we said how big your eyes are and how big your teeth are, and we let them come all the way inside before we showed them what was in the basket." "What was in the basket, Amma?" "The axe, child. The axe was always in the basket. We just did not show it until they were close enough that they could not run." Rotha laughed. It came out broken in the middle, half sob, half laugh, the way laughter does when you have been afraid for a very long time and you are suddenly not afraid anymore. She stayed there for a moment, kneeling on the cold concrete, with her grandmother's thin hand under her forehead and the sea wind moving against the back of her neck, and the smell of jet fuel and salt water mixing in the air around them. She could hear, somewhere very far off, the small noises of the base going about its business, voices, a forklift, a hangar door rolling shut, and they sounded, for the first time in many days, like the noises of a place that did not have to be afraid of the sky. "Amma," she said very quietly into the hand, "I was afraid the whole time." "I know you were, child." "I did not let it stop me, but I was afraid." That is the difference, Rotha. That is the only difference that matters. The brave are not the ones without fear. The brave are the ones who walk the road anyway, with the basket on their arm and the song under their breath, and who do not let the wolf see that they have noticed it. You walked the road. You did not let it see. That is enough. That is more than enough. "Amma." "Stand up, child. The concrete is cold and you are blocking the wheel." Rotha laughed again. She stood up. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She put her hand on the back of the wheelchair. The colonel behind her cleared her throat. "Captain." "Ma'am." "Welcome home." "Thank you, ma'am." "Take your grandmother home, Captain. We will debrief tomorrow. There is no hurry. The sky is quiet." Rotha stood up. She put her hand on the back of the wheelchair. Bjarne helped her turn it. Thorther, somewhere behind them, was laughing about something, and the colonel was speaking softly to a young officer with a clipboard, and the cold wind off the Atlantic moved across the apron and lifted the hem of the red cloak and let it fall again. Rotha pushed her grandmother across the concrete toward the waiting car. Behind them, in a sky that no longer had teeth in it, the first hard stars of a clean winter were coming out. One by one, the way they had come out for 100,000 years over Iceland and wood, with luck and stubbornness and the patience of women in small kitchens, come out for 100,000 more. The footage of the picket withdrawal played on every screen on Earth for the next 3 days. The diplomats from the 3 large powers arrived a week later in ships that did not look like teeth, and they were received with great courtesy and small portions, because Earth had decided, collectively and without much discussion, that it would not be making a fuss about its survival. The fuss was for amateurs. The smile was for the family. The Fenris Compact ceased to exist as a unified political entity within 4 months. Some of its constituent species sued for recognition as independent worlds. Some of them did not. The 41 stripped planets were, where possible, identified and memorialized. Survivors, where any could be found, were repatriated. The senior officers who had laughed about the harvests were brought, by their own peers, before tribunals that did not require Earth's testimony, because the recordings spoke for themselves, and were, by then, in the hands of every species in the arm of the galaxy that cared about the question of who got to eat whom. Rotha was promoted. She did not particularly want to be promoted. She accepted it because the colonel asked her to, and because her grandmother said it would be rude not to. She was given a desk, which she hated, and a medal, which she put in a drawer, and a press appearance, which she got through by imagining her grandmother in the front row making faces at her, which her grandmother in fact was. In the spring, on the anniversary of the broadcast, a young Fenris diplomat came to Reykjavik. She was small for her species, and her teeth did not fit her face very well yet, and she had been sent, alone by what remained of her people, to apologize. There was a state dinner. There were speeches. The diplomat made hers in halting Icelandic, which she had learned badly for the occasion, and which made Rotha's grandmother, watching on the kitchen tablet, snort coffee through her nose. "They are still doing the consonants wrong," the old woman said. "Tell her to come for tea. I will teach her." Rotha told her. The diplomat came for tea. She sat in the kitchen with the cardamom and the old coffee. In the chair Rotha had sat in on the morning of the broadcast a year ago, and Rotha's grandmother poured her a cup and pushed a plate of kleiner toward her and watched her, with the soft yellow eyes of a hunting animal, with the assessing patience of a woman who had been watching things for 91 years. "Child," her grandmother said, finally, in Icelandic, "I am going to teach you to say grandmother in a way that does not sound like the word for soup, and then I am going to teach you the song. And then we will see what kind of neighbor you are going to be." The diplomat, who had been briefed extensively and who had read in preparation every available human source on the events of the previous year, looked at the old woman across the table and understood, in a single clear moment, that she was sitting opposite the axe. She bowed her head. "Yes, grandmother," she said, very carefully, getting the consonants almost right. Rotha's grandmother poured her more coffee. They drank in silence for a moment. Outside, a gull cried somewhere over the harbor. The diplomat held her cup the way a child holds a cup, both hands, looking down into it as though the coffee might give her a better answer than her training had. "Grandmother," the diplomat said finally, "may I ask a question?" "You may ask many." "Why did you not tell us? You knew from the beginning. You knew what we were. You could have refused us. You could have shot at us. You could have done many things. You smiled. You poured us coffee metaphorically. You let us come into the kitchen. Why?" The old woman set down her cup. She looked at the young diplomat for a long time, with the yellow patient eyes of a woman who had been watching things for 91 years, and the diplomat sat very still under the look, because she understood, the way a fox understands when the dog has stopped barking, that the next thing said would matter. "Child, listen to me. We did not tell you because if we had told you, you would have come faster and harder, and we were not ready. We were getting ready. We needed the time, so we smiled. We gave you the time you needed to feel safe because while you felt safe you would not hurry, and while you did not hurry we could prepare. That is the first answer. The second answer is more difficult. We did not tell you because we wanted to give you the chance to be better than you turned out to be. We knew what your senior officers were. We did not know what you were. You personally, the young ones, the ones who had not yet laughed about the harvests. We hoped very faintly that one of you would come to a door and refuse to eat what was on the table. None of you did. That is not entirely your fault. You had been raised inside the harvest, but we hoped. We are a hopeful species in our slow and ugly way, and we do not always get what we hope for, but we always try. So we waited. We waited a long time. We gave you 6 years to be better than the thing that had made you. You were not, so we showed you the axe. The diplomat looked at her cup. I am sorry, grandmother. I know you are. I am sorry for what we were. I know that also. Tell me what to do. The old woman smiled, the other smile, the family smile. Drink your coffee, child. Then I will teach you the song. The song matters more than the apologies. Anyone can apologize. The song is the harder thing. The song is what we sing to remember that we did not start out as the thing with the axe. We started out as a girl on a road with bread in a basket. We had to learn to be the thing with the axe. We learned. It cost us. We hope very much that we will not have to teach it to anyone else. She began, in a thin, clear voice that had not lost its tune in 91 years, to sing the old fishing song from the Westfjords, about a girl who was sent to deliver bread to her grandmother, and who met something on the road that was not what it said it was. The diplomat listened, hunched over her cup, her teeth a little too large for her face, her hands very still. After a while, very carefully, the diplomat began to hum along. Outside, the rain came down on Reykjavik the way it had always come down, and the small lights of the harbor burned, and somewhere over the North Atlantic, a courier hull called the Litla Stulka was being refitted for civilian work, because the corridor of free transit had been dismantled, and the boneyard was just a boneyard again, and there was, for the moment, no need for a girl in a red cloak to drift through the dark with an axe hidden in her basket and a song under her breath. For the moment, the song was still there, the basket was still there, the axe was as it had always been in the basket. Humanity, as it turned out, had been counting all along.